Okay. So this one makes me nervous, so I'm going to do it. I found this in a notebook the other day. This is a beginning of a story that I wrote a while ago that I'm not entirely sure why I abandoned it. There's part of it that I actually really like, so I'm going to read part of it now. The beginning. I have absolutely no idea where it's going, but I kind of like some of it, so I'm going to read it. So there you go. It's written in my chicken scratch, so I may stumble a little bit. So bear with me. All right. Let us talk of Ada. Ada was pure jiggery pokery, a tumble down of torn caution with lightning bug guts blinking in the rifts between. We will talk of this lit fuse, this cacophony of counter arguments, this electric girl. All of us who hear, let us bear her in our brains, her that was, her that would become. Behold the dark man. Behold his intent. Do you know it? We only know him as the Dark Man, unburdened by rightness and unmindful of cost, for all magic has cost. Anyone who disputes that is a stone liar, and if the cost is too dear, or torn from unwilling flesh, we call that magic dark. He meant to kill Ada's daddy, the goodman Byron Finch. That much we know. We know not why, not yet. But we do know this raw nerve, this jangling of pans, this Ada, and we will speak of the day they crossed. The trees whispered to one another, shook hands, and danced. Birds and rodents continued their plans, hoping that our unconcern would hold out. The green rain had been conjured 2 days before, per the city's custom, leaving in its wake new bright buildings, scrubbed of spray paint, gutters swirled with discarded lacquer, and the nostril stab of antiseptic fumes. It was Moon Day, and Feast Day too, and that meant cramped walkways and fair food and games run by scruffled men who smelled of corn wine and resentment. Dwarves trip flipped in the park, tooted horns, beggared empty hats with pointed smiles. Their women sang songs of alleyways and gored brandy and sweat and hot breath, and red-faced men gave them coin and shuffled their loafers and waited for sundown. And when they turned their backs, the dwarfs' faces would slack to grim knowing. Feast day filled the air full of smoke and grease and yeast. Smudged grease paint on accidental faces wore out backs and boot heels. Clowns swept their toil under smiles. The young pretended to be older, and the older pretended to disapprove. Ministers preached half-heartedly. Balloons strained to the sky's frontier. 16 was the cycle. 16 was the number of eras, the number of mother spells. 16 were the chief planets. 16 was the age by which a celestial child would gain their magic. Then or never. Like all magic numbers, it was often hammered to fit where it was not naturally held. 16 months in the calendar, though their year did not divide evenly into 16. 16 colors of the spectrum, when one could only see 8, really. The green rain that cleaned the buildings of their city, it was on a 16-day schedule, even though it was wasteful to conjure it so frequently. And as for the age of magic, only in very rare cases did a celestial's abilities appear at 16, for most had happened by 12. Ada was 12. And she was getting worried about that. She carried that future dread like a garland of oars around her neck, a new ingot thrown on whenever she saw a classmate fix up her first illusion, or suss out a happening, or simply leave the ground and fly. Ada could not do these things, but it was not for lack of gumption and sticking. Ada had read the magic books, had studied the harmonies, knew the theory, the history, the practices. She understood the underlying structures. She could appraise a spell's worth. She could comment on its execution, even at her young age. She simply couldn't do it herself. Ada had memorized. She had theorized. She had spent time knew how many hours reading the works of the masters in their boring half-page sentences and capitalized nouns that were necktie important, and yet, and yet, and yet, she could not. A thing was bottled within her that she did not know how to get out. She knew it had to be there. She was just in its way. She felt it beating on the insides of her heart, a steady thrum of shuffled beat, ka-chunk, ka-chunk, ka-chunk. But she could not let it out. Did it live in her? Or was she wrong? Did she just merely fear displeasing her father, not keeping up with her friends, being less than what she had been told she was, being ordinary? Surely ordinary was fine for others, but to Ada, she couldn't even fly. God. So to her studies then. Master the knowledge and the skills will come. Read more, write more, raise your hand in class, ignore the snickers. It will come. But you don't just cast all that aside, do you? The yammering what-ifs that crawl from under your pillow at night and whisper in your ear that you are right about yourself, and tomorrow everyone will know the truth about you. The exam study sessions that drag exhaustion into the streetlight glare of hopelessness. The lurking terror that you'll never be good enough, that you won't ever get out of your own way. One does not cast these aside very easily. One needs a distraction. One needs ice cream. Ice cream is a pretty great distraction when artfully applied, as is a rare afternoon holding hands with one's father, as is fair food and trip-flipping dwarves and silly men. Ada gulped all these down as she walked. Well, skipped.